Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world. With self-care strategies from Chinese medicine, functional medicine, Ayurveda, neuroscience, and beyond. I'm your host, Brodie Welch, a licensed acupuncturist and transformation catalyst, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. Hello, and welcome to today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I am really excited to share an announcement before we get going with today's episode. And that is, I'm going to be leading a workshop on aligning with the 5 elements of Chinese medicine this fall in Ashland, Oregon. This is going to be the first live and in-person group event that I've offered since before the pandemic. And I always have a blast facilitating this kind of thing. So I am excited to share it with you. In this workshop, we're going to be getting into the nature of each of the 5 elements as a lens that we can use to understand ourselves and the people in our lives better. Kind of like the Enneagram or Myers-Briggs, except thousands of years old and from Chinese medicine philosophy. We have all 5 of the elements within us, but in different proportions. And when we understand which element is dominant in our lives, we understand how we move in the world. It shows up everywhere. And it can be a really powerful tool for our personal evolution. We can take better care of ourselves. We can understand challenges and how to handle them differently. We can understand what makes the other people in our lives tick and then therefore be able to better communicate with those people and be more empathetic and also understand why certain relationships or situations can be really challenging. Anyway, it's going to be a ton of fun. It's in Ashland, Oregon, October 24th to 27th. You'll learn a lot about yourself and a lot about the 5 elements. You'll be led through some personal inquiry. And then you'll have a chunk of the day to do whatever you want, to reflect, go on a hike, wander through downtown Ashland. It has great art galleries and restaurants. We'll pulse between time together and time for you to do your own thing. Space for this workshop is very limited. So if this is resonating and you think you might want to come, I encourage you to take action quickly. Go over to chanticleerashland.com and then click on workshops. You can read all the details and have your pick of rooms. We'll have a link in the show notes. So click on through and get yourself registered today. And now on to today's episode. Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you've listened to the show ever before, you probably know that acupuncture is one of the most powerful treatments out there for pain, especially musculoskeletal pain. And when people come in and I'm treating pain, I like to send them home with things that they can do to speed up their healing process and to reduce pain. And that could look like therapeutic exercises or stretches or self-massage techniques, stress relief, because we know that stress amplifies pain. But it's also really nice to have a little herbal liniment in a bottle that can be applied topically to an area that hurts. And I've sold a lot of these topical herb products over the years, but one of my favorites and the one that I can barely keep in stock in my clinic is Evil Bone Water. And today on the podcast, I'm excited to be talking with the creator of this fantastic product, Dr. Mark Brinson. Mark Brinson is a doctor of Oriental medicine with 30 years experience. He's had several clinics, he's taught internationally, and is a master herbalist. Now, as the CEO and brewmaster of Evil Bone Water, he is in over 1,900 clinics internationally, and that number is growing every day. He still and always will make every bottle by hand with the highest quality ingredients on the planet. Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, Mark. I'm so excited that you're here and that we get to talk.
Oh, it's nice to be here. That intro sounded exciting.
Great. Well, I mean, isn't it exciting when people walk into your clinic in pain and leave like pain-free? It's super cool, right?
It is. It's wonderful. This has been an extremely good profession for me, for sure.
Wonderful. I want to hear a little bit more about your story. I know we've been friends online, hang out in the same circles, but I don't really know what brought you to Chinese medicine to begin with and how you got into making Chinese herbal medicine itself. So tell me your origin story.
Yeah, sure. It was a little bit of a roundabout way. I was going to be a professional athlete, and some injuries sent me instead into the Army, actually the Army infantry. From the day I decided to go to the day I was in basic training was 10 days. And I looked around me and I realized that in some ways the average IQ was right around room temperature. So I was like, what have I done? Because, of course, back then they had laser discs on stuff like that. And the laser disc for the infantry one was notably missing. They're like, oh, it's broken or something. We don't know what it is. You'll love it. So anyway, I got really lucky, height, weight, test scores, and a bunch of other things. I ended up getting recruited to go to the Old Guard in Washington, D.C., which was about 90 days a year of very physical, bang, bang, shoot 'em up, ranger type stuff. And the rest of it was ceremonies, parades, funeral stuff at the White House. Very, very meticulously oriented. Everything had to be perfect all the time, which ended up teaching me a lot. But that's where I got a passion for corrective exercise. I found out some of the problems that I had that kept me out of sports. If I just would have known what I know now, essentially, that I would have been perfectly fine. I could have done some corrective exercise and finished it or started to be that type of athlete. So, anyway, that started my passion for it. I got out of the service, became a trainer specializing in rehab, strength and conditioning coach, then a massage therapist in rehab, then a physical therapist in rehab, all orthopedic specialties. 900 hours of osteopathic internship, 600 chiropractic, because I really, really wanted to be an osteopath. And for those that don't know, the MD and osteopath license are pretty much exactly the same these days. And in practice, they're kind of the same these days. But what osteopathy used to be is a very hands-on, very holistic. You were just as likely to leave the osteopath's office with some type of manipulations, some stretches for home, and some herbs or nutraceuticals, vitamins, as well as you might even have a medication. It was like a perfect blend. And that's the only reason that I was in physical therapy. I really did not like being a physical therapist much at all. But I saved all this money, and back in the dark ages, you had to send away for catalogs to see what each school was all about. And so I had trained with all these guys from the 70s that were just awesome. They taught you don't need any testing really. Most of the time, unless it's weird, you can figure it out on your own. So great with the hands-on work. And anyway, I get these catalogs in, and all the best schools in America were pretty much MD programs with about 6 holistic courses, and none of them really hands-on. And I started, honestly, I just started freaking out because what most people don't know is of an MD education, about 2/3 is drugs and drug interactions. And then you learn most of your good stuff in your residencies and in your internships. And a lot of them don't even make it through that. So, but I had no desire to prescribe drugs or to do surgery. So I had about a 4 month existential crisis. Like, who am I? What am I? What do I want to do with my life? And what I did is something that I highly recommend for people to do. I sort of backdoored the whole thing. I'm like, I don't really care what license I have. How do I want to practice? So I imagined it. I imagined how many days a week I wanted to treat people, what modalities I wanted to use was super important, what I wanted my office to look like, what I wanted my staff to look like, what types of things I wanted to treat. And so what I did is looked all over, found the license that matched that the best. Chiropractic was a little limiting. There's some things that you couldn't do at that time and still can't do to this point. And I told you I didn't like being a physical therapist.
Yeah.
Naturopath is really cool, but it's only recognized in a few states. So I found this acupuncture physician, Doctor of Oriental Medicine license in Florida that was all inclusive, anything that you're trained to do except prescription drugs and surgery. And I was like, all right, right on. Now, being deathly afraid of needles, it was a big step for me.
I
So
bet.
again, one of those quick, within 4 months, I finished up any prereqs I needed, and off I went.
Oh, that is awesome. I love the fact that, well, first of all, what we've lost, I'm sure the in the road not taken in the sports world that or even in the military, we certainly gained in having you in medicine. But I love the idea that you were putting all of these modalities in your bag of tricks, in your toolbox, collecting a sense of how you wanted to, what kind of a practitioner you wanted to be. And then it was like, it just a blank slate, like, okay, it's not this, it's not this. And what was left was the scope of practice that you ended up embracing.
Well, yeah, and I think layering over the years has been the best thing I've done. It never got me to my destination license quickly, but it got me there better. And
Yeah,
one of
yeah.
the things that was what was fascinating about the Doctor of Oriental Medicine program is, it was a 4 year, 3,000 hour postgraduate, and I looked at it. It was what has come to be known as pretty much one of the best schools that there was
Hmm.
in Florida, and Florida Institute of Traditional Chinese Medicine. But anyway, 1,000 hours of it was herbology, and I'm like, how? And then I looked even closer, and that was 500 herbs that are used to make 500 common formulas, and I'm like, that's an hour an herb. And my experience from a trainer standpoint or physical therapist standpoint and all that had been that sometimes herbs work, but I couldn't reproduce results like consistently with somebody. Some things
Hmm.
work, some things don't. Come to find out once I get into school for this that there's exact reasons for that. And if you prescribe something and it doesn't work in Chinese medicine, you either gave them the wrong prescription or the wrong formula. It's pretty much as simple as that. That's how well they work, but it's got to match the person.
Yes.
So that and the things I started to see in student clinic, I fell in love with it really pretty quickly. And yeah, by the time that I was getting out of school, I totally knew that's what I wanted to do. And yeah, so I blended a lot of things over the years. I used mostly patent herbs because, gosh, whether it's stretch or exercise or homework or herbs or supplements, I always err on the side of compliance. So,
Absolutely. I did the same thing in my practice. It's like that, and what you lose in specificity, sometimes you
mm,
gain in people actually taking the thing you want them to take instead of the perfect thing that's going to sit on their counter and never be ingested.
well, that's it. My famous saying is always the herbs only work if you take them. I don't know how many
Yes,
times I've
really
said that over the
true.
years, but and so, so that's why I steered away from crude herbs. And
Hmm.
back in the dark ages when I started, we didn't have granules,
Hmm.
but granules don't taste a heck of a lot better, and there's an
No,
expense factor.
sure.
So I chose to use commercial teas and the full range of Chinese patents with a very solid but inexpensive brand to get people hooked on them essentially. And so then off to treating clinically and learning the ins and outs of that. And we don't get enough of that in school, but I contend that we don't have any time to do that in school. We barely have enough time. I mean, with that 1,000 hours of herbology that I had in school, I got
Yeah.
out and I was like, that's it. I still don't know anything. It
Oh
takes you
yeah,
years to really grasp it.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's so, I mean, school is like school is the foundation for being able to educate yourself, I think from then on.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
yeah, like with it, I'm sure you had a hefty clinic portion of
Oh
school in
yeah.
addition to laying down
Yeah.
those foundations in acupuncture and herbs. Lots of a lot of people think Chinese medicine and they think we mean herbs, but just to kind of pan back, Chinese medicine is this complete system of healthcare that has different branches to it, acupuncture being the sexiest and most well known, but also herbology, body work, lifestyle and diet, meditation, and qigong, right? This idea of being able to
Yeah.
that really anything in life can be applied, steering in the direction of making your diagnosis better or worse or neutral. And so teaching people about how to take care of themselves is a piece of Chinese medicine. And then when we think about Chinese herbal medicine, that is one of the branches. But anyway, just
Yeah,
as
no,
we
absolutely. And my clinical, the way that I always treated things clinically, and I have people that would come to me as interns or associates, is you weigh the big three. You play acupuncture, herbs, and hands-on work, and give that person what they need in the proportions that they need
Mhm.
when they come in. And I also I abandoned really early on telling people not to do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times there's a lot of practitioners, don't do this, don't do that, don't drink this, don't eat that, don't whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
If we can correct it, and most of the time we can without doing that, I can make suggestions. There's some things that
yeah.
would be better or worse for you or whatnot. But
Right.
if you really apply yourself, I'm a firm believer that within 3 to 8 sessions, if somebody walks through your door and you're using those big three,
Yep.
you can make a significant impact and or get the person better, or if not, let them see the path that they're on. But it takes you being humble enough to say, if I treat you more than once or twice or give you a week's worth of herbs and nothing happens, then I'm doing something wrong. Let's figure it
Right.
out.
Yes. Yeah. And there is such a thing as a dosage of acupuncture before we expect this changes
Oh,
to really stay. And so
oh,
yeah,
certainly.
I'm always telling people give it a handful of visits and then we'll
Mhm.
reevaluate. And
Yeah, I always tell my patients, a good physician, especially in natural medicine, should be a bit of a coach or a cheerleader too.
yep.
Don't lie to the person, but give them extremely clear expected outcomes and how they're doing right now. And I always tell people that this stuff that we do isn't linear. It's you take a couple sessions to kind of crack into it, and once you crack into it, you start getting results, and the results eventually become exponential. And
Yes.
then I always, just for a full disclosure things to patients, there's always a point when I can tell they're going to get better, like no matter what I do, because we've already
Hmm.
recreated the pattern. And I tell them that. I say, look, you're going to get better no matter what we do. What we do will just accelerate it. They always come in to
Yeah,
accelerate it
exactly.
for the
Right. Who
most
wants
part.
to be in pain for longer than they have to be?
Yeah,
And at
but
that point,
it's
they have they're bought in because they've seen the progress.
Mhm. And then you
Yeah.
give them the good faith to know
Yeah,
that
of
if
course.
something happens in the future, they can really respect your ethics on the whole thing. You're not
Exactly.
going to just try to treat them forever. So people would always tell me, well, there was a lot of people in my community that would other health professionals, that's a horrible business model. You treat them and then they're gone and they can maintain whatever they want, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's a great business model because then they come
Absolutely.
back to you for everything else.
Well, and they
I don't want to
tell
see them for the
everyone
same
else
stuff.
this is magic. You need more,
Yeah.
like, and
Oh,
they
yeah.
they
That's the big
replace
thing.
themselves, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
I think that's the best. So, what was the leap then from treating in clinic to creating this product, which is, for those who don't know, who are not yet familiar with the wonders of evil bone water, is rooted in a classic formula that was from the martial arts tradition and passed down over the years, and everybody learns about it in school. It's kind of like you can't open an acupuncture
Mm,
clinic without this sort of ubiquitous red
sure.
bottle of of not of evil bone
Hmm.
water, but of the formula Zhengu Shui that it is based on. And it was kind of meh, like it's sort of like like this.
Yeah.
My experience of it is
Yeah.
like, yeah, it is helpful, but this isn't
Yeah.
something I'm going to swear by. And Evil Bone Water is clearly a superior product in so many ways. And I'd love
Yeah.
to know how it came into being.
Well, so and remember, I'm very old school. So I
Yeah.
in the 90s, I was using Shungu Shui before it got what I call watered down.
Okay. Got
So
it.
back in the 90s, all the patent formulas from Asia were basically the same as they were in Asia. They
Hmm.
had the same ingredients, they had the same efficacy. You still had to watch out for knockoffs, which is a consistent and constant thing with them.
Hmm.
But anyway, all my or teacher physicians that were in school, we had 18 double doctors from China that were like all superstars. They had been heads of their department. They had written books. They had done studies. They were just amazing. And they all just swore by this stuff. So in every treatment room, you had a bottle of Shungu Shui and you usually had a bottle of Posemon, which is kind of like its
Hmm.
muscular pear. And
I,
so,
I love the way that stuff smells. It's so good.
yeah, I do too. And the way that not to knock making things with essential oils, but when you make something with the pure herbs and you infuse it instead of using EOs, it has
Hmm.
this very, very clean smell, very lingering clean smell instead of kind of bitey
Hmm.
smelling.
Hmm.
But anyway, so that's what I used. That's what we all used. And in 1999, I remember very distinctly, all of a sudden, China started getting wise that Americans didn't really know about herb quality. So all of a sudden, they dropped one of the major herbs, the most expensive herb, the magic herb, sanqi, from it, and a
Okay.
couple of other herbs. It started as maybe 16 herbs or so. This is a 500-year-old formula that they used to call a national treasure. Now, national treasure, I never really got that. Never got that until I made it myself. But so anyway, they dropped that and a few other herbs, and I was like, okay, but it was still good. It was still pretty decent. So then the years marched on. The price marched up because they started realizing they could get a little bit more money out of us. And I think there was another hit that came around 2008 when there were a few more herbs that were dropped. The average person didn't notice the difference, and still a good product, right? So then the early 2010s came by, and now they dropped a couple more herbs. And I pretty sure started adding food coloring along the line at some point because as an herbalist or that as a higher level herbalist, it's very hard to create that color, really hard with the
Yeah.
herbs given.
Yep.
But then when I finally had it, as I saw this stuff march from $5 a bottle, and I charge 15 in the clinic. I saw it march from $5 a bottle all the way up to 7 years ago. I get my invoice and it was 13, $14 a bottle wholesale. Because what had happened is a big import company had bought it. And subsequently, since then, they've bought 100 of our best. And they called Solstice. And so what Solstice does, their MO is they'll buy something, they'll dumb it down for the American market. They'll get the exclusive import rights to it. They'll put it in a nicer, shinier package that's very Americanized, and they'll advertise to the public along with jacking the price up. So I'm like, look, I'm not making anything for $5 a bottle or $8 a bottle. But when you're getting up to 13 or $14 a bottle, and I don't want to raise my prices to my people, I'll make this stuff. And so I will say this, it did take probably 6 months of research and development a little bit to get it right. I could take most formulas off the shelf and figure out what's in them and recreate it to an extent fairly easily. This was not one of them. This had a lot of very esoteric herbs, and what I was shooting for originally, I was shooting for the 500-year-old formula, that family handed down formula, or the one that China had kind of stolen from the family in the early 1900s. They didn't call it stealing; they appropriated it, I
Ah,
believe,
yes, right.
in exchange for one of the family members' lives. As a matter of fact,
Oh, wow.
so I was kind of going for that. But then, what we do is, as Chinese medicine evolves, there's things in the pharmacopoeia that either sort of aren't sustainable, aren't ethical, aren't practical. So I had to modulate several things in order to get it where it was all of those things, whether where it was GMO, whether it was sustainable, whether it was, and putting all of the goodness back into it. And what was cool is I had a really neat testing ground because so many of my patients were already used to using the commercial product that when we first started making it, we would just kind of shoot it to them and they would see how it was. And our first iterations, they were like, oh my gosh, this is so much better. And we still hadn't really we dialed in the proportions pretty well, but we didn't dial in the actual ingredients. And then as we did, they were like, oh my gosh, this is just so much better. And then when we started using the imperial grade herbs, it was just unbelievable, which is why it can be used for so many things, from infection to burns to bad tooth to hemorrhoids to, I mean, like, all the stuff that people tell me about. I'm like, you did what with it? You put it where? And they're like, no, you don't understand.
Yeah.
you know
Well, so
um
before we go down that, it's like just the fact that like, okay, it exploded for all these other uses.
yeah.
What did people use it for? Like why, just to bring our listeners into the conversation, what is this product typically for? And then if you could define what an imperial grade herb is, because I think a lot of folks
Absolutely.
do not think like as yes, China is right in the sense that we do not know about herb quality in this
Right.
country. We barely know about the quality of food as a culture, except
Sure.
like people who are into it get that the quality of the ingredient really matters. But I think for people, especially when it's written in a foreign language that they don't understand and like they're not familiar with what the
Yeah.
good stuff is supposed to be, much less how to tell. So I'd love for you to just like tell us a little bit about like what are the uses for Zhengu Shui or evil bone water
Mhm.
and what imperial grade herbs are, and then we can go on.
So the uses, it was originally designed for bone healing. And I've even seen it in older osteoporotic advanced diabetics heal shattered kneecaps in like 8 weeks, 12 weeks. I've seen it heal bone in half the time. It's amazing for that, which is why it was originally designed.
Right, for
But also
fractures, right? For
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 yeah, for
healing at the
fractures.
level. And is that where the
Mhm.
name comes from?
Yeah. So, well, that's where Shungu Shui comes
Hmm.
from. Shungu
Yes.
Shui means rectify or correct bone water. The evil bone water comes from a slightly different angle. I could tell you about that in
Okay.
a minute. That's an
Please
odd
do.
one.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, so tendon, ligament, and bone healing is what it was originally designed for. And as a commercial product, Shungu Shui is still pretty darn decent for that. It's taken
Hmm.
out a few things that would be even better, but it's
Hmm.
still decent for that. But anything that actually needs to heal, so especially infection, is crazy good for infection. It's good for skin conditions. We've heard all sorts of stories. So, and it is those imperial grade herbs that we talked about. So, what is imperial grade?
Hmm.
So, people don't understand the herb market in Asia is very similar to like our commodities market in the United States. It is tens of billions of dollars, if not hundreds of billions of dollars that run through it. It's crazy. So they're graded just like the USDA grades things, except USDA in America grades things on size, color, and shape, right? So in China, now the herbs are graded on provenance, like where they're from, the soil that they're from, but also when you get to the higher levels, they're actually tested for microscopic density, they're test or medicinal density, they're tested for genus, they're tested for species, they're tested for all sorts of things. So I didn't know this until I started ordering these imperial grade herbs, which was extremely early on, right after my first commercial batches that I made. I started ordering imperial grade. Our best wholesalers in America, we really don't get but maybe B quality, BC quality. So yes, we can get pesticide free, we can get non-GMO, we can get all of that, but that's still a B quality. So then you get up to excuse me, double A, triple A, and then above triple A is imperial grade. Imperial grade is literally the highest that's available on the market when I purchase. And now we've done this so long that I've gotten my purchases down to the times of the year that certain crops are going to be the best or most in season. Imperial are always the best, but you're definitely going to get the best at harvest time. And the one that I tell, the vehicle I tell people about this for all the time is with cinnamon. So you've all had very tasty cinnamon, right? Very tasty cinnamon comes from trees that are 1 to 3 years old from a really small area of the world near Sumatra.
Mhm.
There's another sub kind that's cheap, that's a little bit toxic, that people don't know that is snuck into their cheapest products. It won't kill you, but it's not the best for you.
Yeah.
But really, that doesn't have very many medicinal properties at that point. Medicinal properties in cinnamon start on trees that are about 5 years old, up to 15 years old, and it's in the twigs and the branches. That's where the medicine sort of resides. So, cinnamon twig and cinnamon branch are two of the herbs that we use in Chinese medicine with slightly different properties. But then after 15 years, so that's where you're getting into the up to maybe A grade, maybe AA grade. You can get up with the twigs and the branches.
Hmm.
For it to be imperial grade, it's got to be over 15-year-old trees, and the density of the medicine is incredible. So mine 30-year-old trees from the mountains of Guangdong, the sheets of cinnamon that you get are the size of your torso. That's like the cinnamon bark. Where that little twig that you get normally that you stick in your hot toddy, that's that's the size tree that came from. So
That is
when you
wild.
break the cinnamon, this imperial grade cinnamon, yes, you smell cinnamon. It's not like tasty like the Sumatra stuff is, although it does taste good, but you will smell so many different familiar things from other herbs, from other medicines that you smelled before. It's like you'll smell 20 different things instead of just that one cinnamon note. And that's pretty much the way all imperial grade herbs are. They are the cleanest. There's no pesticides. They're tested 8 ways from Sunday. They're just the best that we can possibly get. And people, and even the camphor and menthol, which are natural camphor and natural menthol, hard to get, 4 times as expensive. Most people say I'm crazy for doing all these things, but you know what? It's really not that expensive when you look at it. Like, would you want uh, would you want a lesser quality on your grandmother? That's what I always think about. So
That's absolutely the
yeah,
standard I think about too. Like, what would I want for my family members?
yeah,
And
yeah,
if you're practicing medicine, it's like you want people to feel
yeah.
better and you want to give them something that they will feel a noticeable difference in using.
Or and you don't have to say but. So even the alcohol that we use is
Yeah.
potable. It's from the liquor store. It's potable Everclear 190, which you can get commercial grade ethanol, food grade ethanol for gosh, 1/20th the price maybe. But it is not the same. You put it on your skin and you'll immediately see. Even look on WebMD. Everclear has medicinal properties and ethanol is listed as toxic. So, but anyway, how that translates is we don't have any reactions. The only reactions we've ever had reported are when somebody misuses it, which
Mhm.
basically they put it on a compress, cover it with plastic, and leave it for like a day. You're only supposed to compress like in a breathable way for maybe an hour or two
Mhm.
at the most. But other than that, we just don't, even with people that are allergic to the components. So
That's
it's
amazing.
it's almost like a reverse business model that we do here, but I highly
Yeah,
recommend it. We're in a,
absolutely.
a day and age where you can absolutely get anything, but can you get anything of quality? Can you get
Yeah.
something that exactly what all the ingredients are? So anyway, it makes me sleep well at
It's
night.
wonderful. So I have patients who use evil bone water for things like arthritis pain, like chronic pain, acute sprains and strains and muscle aches and all this. And that's of course like not originally it's not fractures, it's not necessarily tendons and ligaments, but it works really really well. And I'm curious about if you can talk like aside from cinnamon, are there ingredients people might recognize, or are they all pretty obscure Chinese medicine?
So so they're not. So like if
Yeah.
we back down the tree just a little bit,
Hmm.
one of our most exotic is a flowering bush that comes from the mountains of Tibet called Banuidan. It's like our hardest to get. I think you can only get it at the imperial grade because it's kind of wild cultivated and it's amazing, but that's where all the antihistamine properties and things like that come from. So,
Mm-hmm.
but it is technically kind of in the lemongrass family. People
Okay.
don't understand that like the family of lemongrass. There's a whole lot of things that don't smell like lemon and
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
look like lemongrass, right? But three of the herbs, and this is kind of a common thing too, Iju, Huzhong, to an extent, one of the other ones. But anyway, are in the turmeric family. So, like when I get these herbs at that quality, what you'll see is they are exuding this kind of yellow, sort of powdery substance, which is the that turmeric family stuff that's coming out of them. And I mentioned that one because turmeric is something that people would recognize.
Yeah, and it's in our pharmacopoeia, and it's
Mhm.
in that category of it has properties of moving blood. And anytime,
Right.
just for folks who are curious, when how Chinese medicine looks at pain is we think of it as stagnation in the channels, stagnation of energy, but also stagnation of blood as something material, and that moving that stagnation, kind of like taking the log jam out of the river to restore the free flow of energy, we
Sure.
take pain away. And so these herbs that have those properties, like if you were to ingest them, they have the properties of moving blood, and taking them in through the skin, they like the body's getting that same message of move the blood through this area in order to speed the healing.
Well, and good formulas also are actually giving the body what it needs locally in order to create those healing changes. So it doesn't have to go through your digestive system, I think is the big
Yeah.
thing. The other thing, we do a lot of recommend a lot of combinations with it because the skin is amazing and it's a great barrier to all sorts of things that want to try to get in and harm us, but it's also designed to absorb things that we
Right.
need. So for some reason evil bone water tends to change skin permeability extensively, so anything that you put on after it is going to become noticeably more potent or last longer. We've even done some studies on some topical CBDs and whatnot that come up with some really crazy results when they're combined. So I've become a big fan of sort of layering things over the years. So maybe layering a little bit of Evil Bone water then with something like Posemon or something that's made more locally by somebody in America
Mhm.
that's similar. And basically, when you layer stuff at home, you have to think of it this way: something like a liniment that penetrates instantly, that's gone. That's going in, as deep as it can go. It's going all the way down to the bone, ligament, tendon level. And in the case of evil bone water, can draw things with it. But the thicker that something is, the more time released it is. And in some cases, a little bit more superficial it works.
Oh, so
So,
something like a cream or an oil that
yeah,
has more viscosity to it, like as opposed
yeah.
to literally the Everclear that Evil Bone Water is based in.
Yeah, you think of those as more sort of time released herbs that are
Hmm.
just kind of penetrating into the area over an extended, length. So there's all kinds of strategies that you can use with that for wound healing, for instance, evil bone water, and then some burn cream afterwards. There's people that make burn cream. There's the classic Qing Wan Hung. But if I really need a wound to heal up, I'll put some Yunnan Payao, which has one of our herbs Senshi in it,
Sanchi, right?
and I'll
Hmm.
I'll have them put a thin layer of that on after, and then kind of cover it because it's kind of delivering those herbs overnight, and you can leave that overnight.
Nice.
But
Yeah, for
yeah,
people who
it's
don't know, burn cream is an absolute must to have around.
yeah,
It's so
yeah,
potent and wonderful. And so you're saying evil bone water goes on first because that increases that
yep.
absorbability, and then layering on something else. How about something like arnica?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you like I said, throw in your evil bone water first because arnica is pretty absorbable, but this with most things, let's say for instance that it's something like arnica that has a pain relief effect or CBDs that has a pain relief effect, and you're very, very used to using it. A lot of times when you layer, you'll get another couple hours of relief out of it. It's really pretty neat. It's something that I'm kind of with all herbs that I do, I'm kind of a and even homework that I give patients, I'm kind of more of a spoon instead of a shovel kind of guy. But I think that a lot of times, if you're not layering, you're kind of doing the person a disservice because sometimes the effect is so much greater or the healing is so much quicker that it's definitely worth exploring it. And
What,
the
yeah.
biggest thing, especially with more naturally oriented products, you're not going to hurt anything.
What
That's
do you think is going on there? Like it just is it different mechanisms of action or like that? I mean, we know as herbalists that like the whole premise in Chinese herbology is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and that's why we give formulas instead of single herbs, typically for the vast majority of conditions. And because really it's like you've got again for our listeners who are may be less familiar that you've got a main primary herb in the formula that is doing the job, and then you have an assistant to that primary
Mhm.
herb, and then you usually have a guide that tells what layer of the body or what channels to go that the formula should go to,
Right.
and then you have somebody in there that's moderating the potentially harsh effects of some of the more
Right.
potent herbs. And
Right.
so it's this blend that kind of it's like this team that is working to correct one of those underlying imbalances that we diagnose them with while treating whatever symptom that is that they have going on. So it's is it just kind of like expanding that entourage like and
Well, it kind of is. So with internal medicine formulas, I rarely have people leave with more than one base formula
Mhm.
and then maybe an adjunct tea or an adjunct something or another, perhaps. But it's kind of the same thing with topicals. More is not necessarily better. So when I use two things together, I'm looking at what they do and almost thinking them as one thing or
Mhm.
as the strategy that's happening. So let's say, for instance, that I've got something that's going on around a joint maybe, but I know that there's a muscular component. Evo bone water is going to be okay. It's going to be great for the joint part, the part that needs the reduction of inflammation, et cetera. But for the muscular part, it's going to be okay because it penetrates deeper and sort of leaves. So I want something that's going to really, really affect that muscle layer a little bit more. So that's when I'll use something in that category, something that's maybe an oil. But then if somebody's going to be able to keep it covered, maybe a balm, something with a little bit more stick to itness or a little bit of a barrier to it to let that area work. So yeah, you're exactly right. You want to think of what you're trying to accomplish first and then figure out what these tools are that you're using to do that. And the cool thing about it
Right.
is if you're doing it properly, this isn't something, and I believe this with a lot of supplementation, et cetera. With these things, you'll know if you're using it faithfully, you'll know within a week. Often you'll know within just a couple of days. I don't like things that say, "Oh, well, you got to use it for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, and then maybe you'll." No. To
Right,
me,
right.
that's just not a lot of bang for the buck. It's not good medicine. If you're not getting results, if you're not something isn't changing within a week or two, there's a few exceptions, but for the most part, it should be impactful. Now,
Yeah.
that said, remember they only work if you use them. So somebody that says, "Oh, I used this a couple times," and well, what do you mean a couple times? So in the week
Right.
since you saw me, you used it twice. That's not really quite enough? So anyway,
Yes, dosage matters and
yeah.
having it it's like learning a language, right? The body gets more familiar and then it can speak it more fluently the more it hears it,
Mhm.
I think. You have a TV debut soon, or and I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Oh gosh, so that should be interesting. There's a reality show competition called The Blocks that's been around for I think 15 or 16 seasons. The first 10 seasons, you could tell they were kind of feeling their way through. Then they started to get pretty professional about it. And it's interesting. It's a 60 business sort of competition that you do over the course of 7 days. It's not a big drama one. Like they don't bring back your ex or something like that and have them do a presentation with you. It's
Encourage
definitely
you to
nothing like that.
pick fights with the other
Um,
contestants, like thing.
yeah, but you have to be over a certain amount in business, but you can't be over, I think it's 2 or 3 million. And if you haven't ever heard about people growing businesses, it's the 1 to 3 million area that is the hardest area to break because there's so many things that you've got to learn during that time and so many things that you have to do differently than you normally would that if you can make it past that one to 3 million zone, then your business typically is solid for good as long as you want to have it.
That's like
And
where
so,
this learning to scale comes into play, and then once you're there,
yeah,
it's like it's not reinventing your whole thing.
yeah, and a lot of the business that people study for, it isn't, it's up to that point. Like a lot of your business
Yep.
classes, entrepreneurial classes, things, the books that you read, they're not talking about this zone that's in there.
Hmm.
So anyway, it's mostly businesses that are in that zone. You split off into 5 groups each morning. You're given a 2 hour coaching session on something, whether it's like pay for click or whether it's logistics or whatever it is. Then you're given a 5 to 10 minute little session. Then you have to do a presentation on exactly how you're going to apply it to your business, and you're graded 1 to 60 every day, and you compete every single day from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Until you're done. And it just sounds like a fantastic opportunity for me to solidify and put down on paper and really get in my mind straight some of the changes that are in my brain, but I haven't really, voiced. But also I have a very kind of an unconditional, untraditional business model. I have from the beginning had a very specific design that I was going after. So adding all of the new school stuff that people are doing, even if it's just in theory, I think will be amazing. And actually, I looked at it the other day. I think there's actually prizes. I don't really care, but I think there's actually a lot of prizes, and angel and adventure or venture capital money. I've done Evil Bone Water for 6 years with zero of my own dollars. This has all been prepay. We haven't really done any advertising. We pay with for everything in cash when we can. So I'm not really interested in gaining money from this experience, but what I am interested in is Chinese medicine really getting out there and letting them see how professional our profession is, and also the power of some of the herbs. I think that we're really on the cusp of being able to blend things with most of America, and that's part of the reason that I designed Evil Bone Water the way that I did. I want it to be like an emissary for our medicine, and really making our profession as a whole kind of prosper. That was the complete design from the beginning. So yeah, this should be interesting. I always tell people I wouldn't wish fame on my worst enemy, and this will not probably give me any level of fame, but a little bit of notoriety would be great, especially like I said for our profession.
Well, absolutely. Our profession doesn't have paid lobbyists, like
Right,
like
right,
our profession is broke and kind of dying. And if you look at schools closing to be any
sure.
indication, or the fact that people graduate, I mean, we have these like 3,000 hour master's degree entry level things that people then have a ton of debt paid to pay back. We are expected to open our own clinics. There aren't a ton of jobs. So like all of us who are in it, like every single practitioner that I know got here in some sort of really roundabout way because we want to help people. And then we're supposed to suddenly know how to like also be entrepreneurs and also like know the back end, and this opportunity sounds like not only for you to showcase Chinese medicine to an audience, but also to kind of like go through your own business boot camp in terms of like putting some of your ideas into getting clearer. I'm excited for you and for us to see what happens there. We'll be rooting for you.
Yeah, it should be good. And I taught internationally for, gosh, probably a decade. That's how I made most of my money.
Uh-huh.
So it's right up my alley as long as I'm
Great.
very well versed in it. And I'll be studying all the way up into it because I think it's important that I'm up there in the top 5. Because if I am, those are the people that are going to get the airtime.
Yeah,
Thus, Chinese medicine is going to get the
exactly.
airtime. Like I said, there isn't anything that I need for my business as far as it goes. Although I really do think that the education, that kind of, I do well in situations like that, as far as the learning process goes. It's going to be fantastic. But
That
at the
sounds
same
great.
time, if I do well, I think we all do well. So I'm taking it pretty seriously.
I think that's awesome. I before I let you go, I really appreciate the generous amount of time you've spent with us here today. I have to know where Evil Bone Water came from as a name, like the inside scoop, because you hinted at that
So
earlier. Yeah.
I'll tell you, it's honestly still a mystery. You know, nobody is ever going to come into your clinic and ask for a bottle of Shanggu Shui.
It's
They're
true.
gonna they're gonna ask for the stuff that you gave me last time. They will never
Hmm.
even approach the Chinese words, even if they've seen you for years.
Right.
So over the years, I would tell people the story that happened to me in student clinic. So I chose when I went through Chinese medicine school to not worry about the Latin for herbs. I was going to learn the Chinese and I was going to learn medical Chinese
Yeah,
and the common names.
that was my decision too. You got to because yes, for those who have not studied, you have to learn all the 500 herb friends in three different languages.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and the Chinese names are so descriptive of the herb or what it does or whatnot. I was like, I got to do that, so I got to choose another one, and Latin isn't going to be it, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, as I was doing this, it definitely gave me a leg up on things. And early on in student clinic, the observing physician there was one of the real master herbalists. I didn't realize in our school they were getting imperial grade herbs from China for our whole pharmacy. I had no
Oh,
idea
wow.
the quality of these things like until many, many, many years later. So this guy, somebody asked him what Shanggu Shui meant because, like you said, we all used it in all of our clinics. And he looks at it and he goes, "Oh, evil bone water!" Ha 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 ha. It gives this like weird, sinister chuckle, and I'm like, "That's not what that means." And then I just kind of blew it off that he was just messing with the new interns because culturally, the Chinese, when they're teaching, they really don't give you anything outside of the books until you show some prowess or you've been around for a while. They're not wasting their time on the new person that's going to drop out in a year, right? So I figured it was just like one of those things and just, filed it away and whatever. But then 3 years later, I'm in an advanced class and somebody asked the same question, and a whole different master was like, "Oh, ho, ho, evil bone water." Ho, ho, ho. And I'm like, it's not evil bone water. So anyway, I still don't know why they called it that.
It's not
Um,
rectify evil from the level of the bone or like something like that.
it doesn't have evil in the name. I mean, mine
Right, right,
does,
right, right.
but it doesn't have. And when they say so, evil isn't a direct translation. It means basically something that needs to leave. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
right, right.
Something that's disorganized, dysfunctional, just whatever that needs to go. So anyway, I would tell that story over the years to patients before I would prescribe it to them because I feel like there's certain topicals you should prescribe because if you don't, they're never going to find out about it. They're not going to know you've got this perfect thing for them. They're not going to go pick it up from the store. So I felt, well, in order to help them use it because it's really weird and the box is all in Chinese, let me go ahead and just tell them the story. So they all remember the story. They all thought it was funny. They would come in and ask for the bone stuff and this, that, and the other. So anyway, when it was time to make my own, I was like, well, I got to call it evil bone water. So I called it Sheng Zhegu Shui, which means rectify, correct, or vanquish evil bone water. And I honestly, I still don't know why they called it that. I've got no clue, but
Okay,
it
here
wasn't the only two times I heard it.
I have a theory. Could this like, and I do not, I don't know Chinese all that well,
Right?
but when we're thinking about like external pathogenic factors or
Sure.
like that there, so like things that make us sick for the lay people, the stuff that comes in from the outside, viruses,
Hmm.
bacteria, fungi, things
Right.
that could, or wind cold, wind heat, wind damp, etc. Things that come in from the outside that don't belong in the body are considered, they could be considered evil winds, and because not
Sure.
because they're bad but because they don't belong, and
Right.
that when we think about, yeah, that basically it's like what this formula does is it and then is whatever is it's righteous or upright, right,
Yeah,
is the
it's
chi of the body
correcting.
that's supposed to, that is like the proper chi of the body. When I think about, for example, treating someone with cancer, I don't think about doing anything with the cancer. I think about rooting for the righteous chi of the body or the
Sure.
upright chi of the body.
Yeah.
In which case, it's basically like we root for the righteous by, in certain cases, expelling the evil. In certain
Right.
cases, it's reckoning with it if it's at a different level of the body or anything. But I wonder if it's
You
it seems
know,
like forces of exogenous forces that have come in and caused problems. But then again, like, our causes of disease, right? The external causes are like the elemental ones. The miscellaneous ones are things like accidents or injuries or
right.
and then
So I
yeah.
think it could be that, but I have a sneaky suspicion. So during the Cultural Revolution, I don't know if many people know about that, but Chairman Mao, because a lot of his people were illiterate, a lot of people were following all kinds of it's ghosts that are causing these things to happen. He knew they were falling behind with the rest of the world and wanted to bring people into it in some very harsh ways. And one of the things that most people know is he tried to stamp out Chinese medicine.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of real dissidents to that. And a lot of times dissidents were either silenced or killed. So that family line had held on to this formula for 500 years, and I can't remember the guy's name, which is killing me right now. But so in the early 1900s, one of the people in that family line that had that formula, he was quite a military dissident of sorts. He was a violent man. But anyway, he was sentenced to death, and they said, well, I'll tell you what, we won't kill you if you gift the formula to us of Shungu Shui. So it was kind of one of those things that was really absconded by the Chinese government and then ended up being a national treasure. This is one for all of us, for all of the people. And so part of me thinks that the herbalists might still have a little bit of a bad taste in their mouth about that. So that
Okay.
might be the evil bone water. But
Interesting.
I honestly really don't know. But I was like, the only thing that I can possibly call mine is Shangji Gu Shui. Now, the funny thing is that people will now ask for it when they come into the clinic, but they don't ask for evil bone water. They ask for the bone juice, the bong water, the Brinson juice. They ask for all sorts of the curachrome,
All
the
of its nicknames.
yeah, but at least they're asking for it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it was a really good move because despite what a lot of people have thought that I'm crazy along the way for all the decisions that I make, but it's extremely memorable. So people will not forget about it.
It is indeed memorable branding, and that is absolutely key. Both my
Right.
parents were advertising copywriters. I can tell you yeah, if nobody, you can have the best ad in the world, and if people don't remember the name of your product, it is pointless. So
Yeah, and I
you've
do
got
want to
that
put
going on.
a little shout there to people that are making stuff.
Yeah.
Really think about your name. Really think about your color. Really think about your smell. Really think about these things. You need something that's memorable because that's just the way that the brain works. You know, if you have something that's clear or translucent that doesn't have much of a smell to it, that has just a generic name, it doesn't matter if you have the best thing in the world. If it doesn't if it's not memorable to the person, if the person doesn't pick it up the next time and know what it is, smell it, know what it is, feel it, know what it is, the chances of them continuing to use it, even if it's fantastic, are a little bit low. So you have to think about these things. And I'm a purist as far as my ingredients go and things like that. I'm not going to add some color. But let's say, for instance, that you do have that product that is just kind of clear or like white or whatnot. Why not find something like a little bit of Qing dye, which with people don't know, it's indigo, which is beautiful, but you can't use too much because it'll stain or whatnot. But just a little bit might leave just this really little beautiful glow to it. That's memorable. That's unique. You know what I mean? Or there's all sorts of herbs like that have these very distinct, neat colors. Or there's herbs that have sort of distinct smells. And what most people don't know, especially the people that complain about the smell of evil bone water, they don't know how bad some of the Chinese liniments smell. Like
Exactly.
it's on a scale. It's not doesn't even reach the scale of nastiness
Oh,
that
I
some
think
of
it's
our
lovely. It's like
yeah,
mapley
it's
and
like yeah,
cinnamon and
pancakes.
yeah, exactly. It's delicious, I think.
Yeah, but
And
people definitely think about that when you make something. Think about your name. Think about being memorable.
I think that's great advice. I remember reading in some sort of book about how we make decisions that originally, like the makers of Febreze didn't have any scent to it, and then they like added all this like horrible toxic fragrance and
Right.
that because it became the smell of clean, right?
Right.
It became the smell that people would associate with having used the product. And as someone who like never buys anything with scent, it's going to be like just something for my body to have to detoxify from. It's like wow, couldn't they have just left it alone? But there you go. It's
Yeah.
like that. It's like that. What you're saying, like there is some, and especially smell. I think that it goes to a place in the brain that
Oh,
the more senses we can involve, the more memorable something is.
well,
For sure.
100%. If you smell your grandmother's cookies at her house, like if that notes of that hit your nose, it transports you. You know what I mean? So if we can do it, I mean, we are at this golden age in the profession of making medicinals right now, because especially with Solstice buying everything up, but all across the board, you've got all these companies that are putting out really what I consider just bare minimum products. You know what I mean? Just getting by products as far as quality goes, that you can most definitely, with the prices that they're charging, produce something high quality for less. And high quality every single day is going to outperform and under liability you,
Yeah.
like, just every single time. And so it's like the market is really ripe. I mean, when you're talking about something that's five or maybe $5 to $10, it's really hard to make something quality, for less than the big companies do. But that's not what people are charging for things anymore. They're getting up there in price. So get out there and make stuff.
What a wonderful, encouraging message to give folks out there, because the world does need companies like yours who are doing it the right way, paying attention to quality, paying attention to sustainability, doing things ethically, that is about helping people and helping people take care of themselves, and also just doing it in a sustainable way that's going to be good for the planet and practitioners and everyone who buys it and participates it. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be here today and to sharing your experience and these great stories with everybody. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch?
Facebook and Instagram are always easy to find me. Evil Bone Water is both of the names of those. The website for acupuncture physicians, we only wholesale cases of 24 to acupuncture physicians. But if you go to evilbonewater.com, we have a where to buy map where we've got over 1,900 clinics that if you pop in your zip code or your city, you can usually find a clinic there that carries us. And the best thing about that is that's where we do allow people to sell for whatever they want. So a lot of times you'll get a significant discount. Online sales, we're not on Amazon, and I that's a big thing to me not to be on Amazon.
Right.
But prices around $40 a bottle online. But our website also has all of the best online sellers that are there. And all of these people, we make sure that everybody just follows the same ethics that we do in business. It's extremely important to us, and because we want to help as many people as possible, but we want to do it as ethically as possible and make it where the acupuncture physicians make good money and we make good money, and it all just it's a win-win-win for everybody all the way around. So, but yeah, and like I said, if you're making something, especially if you're scaling something up and you get to a little sticky point, don't hesitate to contact me. We don't, like I said, really advertise. We just are at a great point in this business where we can just provide value. So I always try to provide people with free information or entertainment or whatever we can do just to like I said, promote the whole profession. So yeah, easy to get in contact with.
Well, I'm grateful that you're doing what you're doing. And yeah, if you are local to the Willamette Valley, where I am in Oregon, you can come by my clinic where I have Evil Bone Water on my shelves.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks again, Mark. I really appreciate your time.
No problem. It was a pleasure talking with you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening today. To check out the show notes, get on my email list, or drop me a line, head to brodiewelch.com. That's Brodie with an IE and Welch with a CH. I'd love to hear from you. If you learned something new or feel inspired to try something different in your life, I'd love for you to pay it forward by sharing this episode with a friend who you think could also benefit, and give them a reason to listen. You'll be helping to create a world where we encourage each other to embody self-respect. Till next time, be good to yourself.